Good morning and welcome to today's webinar, HP Service Manager, Meet the Developers. My name is Mary Kay Peterson and I'm one of the co-leaders of the Vivid HP Service Management Special Interest Group. I am the Director of Service Management and Enterprise Security at Mentor Graphics, and I'm very excited to bring to you today a panel of folks from HP. Next slide. Today's presenters are Irene Geist. Irene is a service manager, customer-facing R&D specialist since last summer with Service Center and Service Manager experience since 1998. She was an IT help desk engineer before that. This particular picture was taken in Torrey Pines State Natural Reserve, where she's been a volunteer for 10 years now. Our next panelist is Jerry Yan, who has more than 16 years of enterprise management software development experience in virtually every role, architect, developer, and project manager. Jerry's been working with ITSM since 2007, starting from Service Manager integrations, then Connect It, and most recently in Service Manager as a functional architect. Our next panelist is Pete Budick, who is a functional architect with the ITSM group, currently working on Service Manager. Coming from the Peregrine acquisition, he has worked with the service management product in both professional services and development. Pete has been the technical lead behind many features in the product, most notably the document engine and process designer. And last but not least, we have Steve Anderson, who is a senior product manager. Steve has worked in Service Center and Service Manager R&D for over 10 years as a developer, Scrum Master, Team Manager, and Program Manager. Steve has been in product management for Service Manager since the beginning of last year. So this morning, the format of today's session is yours. I am going to be taking questions from the audience, posing them to our panelists here, and then our panelists will answer the questions. So I guess to start with here, let's get our question pane open up here. And we will begin. Our first question comes from Frank Arvidsson, and he says, we purchased the service request catalog for our upgrade to Service Manager. However, our system is set up with an HR EMP number as the key. We found out that SRM can only display this key on the main page, not very user-friendly. So we are delaying implementing SRM till it is changed to allow additional fields. When do you think this change will occur? And so I will open up to our panelists.
Hello, this is Steve. So I'm trying to make sure I understand the question. So you want to be able to display an additional field in SRC is what I'm understanding. So we do have some features in our roadmap on Service Request Catalog to allow additional tailoring. So I can't tell quite exactly what tailoring functionality you wanted, but it's possible that it could be addressed in the next upcoming release. And I probably just need a little more detail to be sure if it's covered in the current scope or not.
Okay, so we're looking for questions. The next question comes from Frank again. Do you know when that release will be?
So we are not allowed to give exact timing or version numbers due to HP policies. So I can't communicate anything more than we have some enhancements in that area in the next one.
And so this is Mary Kay just making a commentary, and it's truly only my opinion. I've been to HP Discover every year for a number of years, and HP always seems to bring something to market during that time frame. And so maybe we will see it in June. That's purely speculation. I realized that I did not tell you guys how to ask questions, so I'm going to run through that real quick here. I wanted to let you know this session is being recorded, and it will be available to all members afterwards. If you have a question, please type your question in the question pane. And if you look at the web control, you can see there's an area where you can type your question. And it looks like we have some additional questions coming in here. The next question says, SRC, when ordering a service item, users have to enter a title for submitting this. This makes no sense. Do you have to enter an order title when ordering something by Amazon? And HP, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I understand the feedback there. So you would prefer that it just defines a title based on the items you order or not require a title. I'd have to think on that more, but that is good feedback.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
The next question says, can you elaborate on how the new SaaS version of Service Manager 9.x will differ from the on-premise version?
So again, this is Steve. So at this point, we don't have any messaging around a new SaaS version.
Okay. All right, we're looking for some more questions. While we're waiting for that, I thought it might be interesting to have each of our panelists describe something that you currently are working on that you can share with us. We'll start from the left with Iris.
That's interesting. What I'm working on right now, I am organizing and holding a twice-a-month practitioner forum, actually 2 of them, on Service Manager and its HP integrations such as Ucmdb, RC, etc. Those practitioners forums are where customers and HP folks can dial in, and we share our challenges and successes. Pretty much we talk about what we're doing with our products and what works well, what doesn't work well. We ask for ideas and feedback. And that is a lot of fun, and if anybody on the phone is interested in this, they can email me. My name is Iris Geist at hp.com, and I am more than happy to send you information on how to sign in for that. The other thing I'm currently working on are upgrades. I'm working on ways to make upgrades easier, more fun, less time-consuming. And the third thing I'm working on is publishing white papers. I am planning on publishing 2 this week on how to set up single sign-on in a horizontally scaled system, because it's slightly different from a vertically scaled system, and trying to explain the different kinds of memory Service Manager uses. And if you're ever interested in finding those white papers, you can go to support.openview.hp.com and do an advanced search for the product of Service Manager, all versions, and check the white papers checkbox and uncheck everything else, and you will find all kinds of hopefully interesting things there.
Great.
That's all I do.
Great. That sounds interesting. So it's nice to know that anybody can join. Good. Next, Jerry, could you tell us what you're working on?
Recently I'm working. My most recent focus is again on the integration and the solutions. Basically, it's about the CCRM, change, config, and release management, and also the the clip, closed loop instant, and the process. So also I've been working to improve the SM Ucmdb integration to ease the integrate between these 2 products, which is the core of those integrations. And other than that, I'm also taking horizontal role to simplify the service manager experiences. So I think that's about it.
Okay, well that's quite a plate full. Pete,
Yeah.
Pete, can you tell us what you're working on?
Some of it.
Yeah,
So I'm
just some.
still working to improve the work we've done on the process designer. That's something I've been very excited about, and one of the things we're doing is working to move that into the other modules. It's out there in knowledge and change, and we know we're not done with knowledge and change. In fact, we've been also working on some new features for change management that again will be out in a future patch. Would be all we could say around the planning tasks. And then I guess I'm working on ways to simplify the experience. So we've done a lot with the user experience. We've done a lot with the administrator experience. I'm sorry, the implementer experience with Process Designer. So we're looking at ways to simplify administration of the system and setting it up, connecting to databases, all the things that we have to do for our system. We're just looking at ways to make it easier and more productive at the same time.
That's great to hear. I have a generation of help desk workers that would really enjoy a simplified user experience. And last, Steve, can you tell us what you're working on?
Yes, so one of the major threads I'm working on right now is reviewing the process definitions for the help desk modules, so service desk, incident, and interaction, and that's kind of aligned with what Pete was talking about Process Designer, so reviewing our process definitions and updating them in coordination with our service management reference model from our professional services organization. So we want to get those modules updated and moved on to Process Designer. And then along the same lines, I'm also starting to look into what our process definitions and implementations could look like for release management and service request fulfillment.
Okay, wow. You guys are busy. I'm looking forward to June. So next question, has been actually quite a few here. Let's see. The next one. Is SRC planned to be the successor replacement for ESS? And then there's just a comment, there are some features missing.
Yeah, yes, so we do understand that we don't quite have functional equivalence between ESS mode, ESS.do, and SRC, but we do see, we do currently plan to continue to build out on SRC and evolve it to the point where it could be a replacement for ESS mode, although it is not currently that. So the two major areas that I hear about on SRC in terms of missing functionality are knowledge search and more flexibility in terms of tailoring. And those are both things that we're looking to make progress on in the next release that includes an update on SRC. Great.
The next question says, hi, I recently asked the forum, is there a way to make a table column in a virtual join subform sortable? And I was told that there is a, oh my gosh, QCCR1E21846, whatever that is, but the status is in investigation, and this issue was last updated July 2011. Any status on this?
I'm seeing if anybody knows anything more on that.
Not from my end, Steve.
All right. So I'd have to look into that QC record. But so my understanding on sortability on virtual joins is the only way to control the order is by the query that's issued to the database. So you can make some changes by specifying keys that would then be used by the query that returns the data for the virtual join, but it's not possible to make it so that you could click on the column header and make it sort. So I believe that would be there would need to be an architectural change to allow us to implement that feature, which is probably why the enhancement request is in investigation, although it should get updated and moved to some more definitive state rather than sitting there since July.
Okay, we'll provide these questions after this webinar so that we can follow up. Next question is, now I'm working with SM702 and will upgrade to 711. The question is there any way to estimate the effort according to everything that was modified out of the box in this customized installation?
Well, since upgrades are my topic, it is always hard to say, just from looking at a system, how hard an upgrade will be. I can tell that much. Upgrading to SM930 with upgrade patch 3 is a lot less involved as other upgrades have been. The things that are different in upgrade patch 3 are it will not do full table copies on some fields, and instead it will give you the option to do it yourself or not do it. So that makes the upgrade utility run faster. It checks if a record that the customer has modified was or was not modified by HP, and if it was not, it just says kept customer and you don't have to do any conflict resolution. I find that that affects roughly a third to half of what would have been a conflict prior to upgrade patch 3. So the biggest thing, though, is in determining how fast is the upgrade going to be, despite, of course, how well your database is maintained, is what is your upgrade goal? Do you want to go closer to out of box? Do you want to keep the same look and feel? Or do you want to mix and match? For example, do you want to have new integrations or not, and stuff like that. I just see the chats here that you're trying to upgrade to 711. My personal opinion on that one, and I 100% stand behind that, don't upgrade to 711 when 930 upgrade patch 3 is around. It will be a lot faster and a lot easier on you. I hope that helps with the question. And if you have questions on upgrade patch 3 for 930, please do let me know.
Great. The next question is, what is the timeline for cleaning up issues with the web client? For instance, one of the issues has to do with when the cursor is in a read-only field. If the backspace key is selected, the command is sent to the controlling application, i.e. the web browser, with unexpected results. I believe this has been known since 2009 without resolution. Is there a time frame for this fix? Another issue relates to the web tier not processing condition statements in format fields, visible / read-only field, read-only conditions, for example.
All right, so I can't respond on those specific issues just because I don't have enough visibility into exactly which defects, but I can say in general we are, of course, investing in defect correction on the web tier and on other parts of the application, and are doing regular patches and updates on those components. So it's hard for me to comment on specific issues unless I happen to have run into them very recently. So I think it would be best to go through support to get the regular ones, but I can definitely say that we're continuing to go through and correct defects, and we'll be putting out patches to address quite a few of them.
Great, thank you. Will the Service Manager database be overhauled soon, maybe using more specific names and tables that match the modules? Great question.
That is a great question. Pete, did you want to kind of talk about this in general?
Well, again, I'll need a little guidance on exactly what we can say at this point. So stop me if I need to. So one thing that makes it very hard to do on the main product is the upgrade path for you, the customer. So if we were to come out with a new product, it would be something that we would want to do is rename tables, use the UDM standard for the naming convention. But right now, the upgrade is already one of our focus points to make easier. And if we do change the names of fields and tables, the upgrade gets that much harder. So there's two parts of it. So one is fixing or changing the applications, which is something that we could manage. But then taking a customer system and upgrading it becomes a very large task. It's not going to be said that we won't do it. It is something that we're looking at along with changes to the database itself and how it reacts to the back-end RDBMS. But one thing that I could say that this is not something you would see in a minor release. It would be something that would only be addressed in a major release, and again, only if we can get a handle around the upgrade, because we know the investment that you put in your systems, and we can't just ignore that or make it disappear. So it's something we'd like to do. It's something we're looking at how we can do with the least amount of
disruption
problems.
Yeah.
But that's about what I could say about it. Steve, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think the main focus there is becomes a much more difficult problem when we're looking at how to preserve customer investment in their tailoring and in their system, and not end up in a situation where the upgrade it takes just an inordinate amount of time because of all the data manipulation that we have to do on the transactional records in a customer system.
Okay. I noticed that SRC and release control are using newer technology, truly Web 2.0. And I would say when I saw the SRC last year at HP Discover, my jaw dropped and I said, wow. But HP 9.x is still more mimicking that look and feel using older technology. Is there a plan to change the web architecture, and if so, can you give any kind of time estimate on when? I know that you can't give time estimates, but if you could at least say if you're working on it, and give us hope.
Yeah, so I can address a couple things we're doing on the web client, and I definitely agree that SRC is a very good-looking product. It's great what they've been able to do in that area and the look and feel of it. On the main service manager, require a little more flexibility. But one thing that we have done, and you can see this in the 930 release, is we're starting to add in components that are more that are controlled in a different way than in the traditional applications. So my first example of this is the process designer workflow editor, and the workflow editor pane and the condition editor. So I expect that we will continue to use kind of that model where we're adding more functional components into Service Manager that are not accessible through things like Forms Designer, so they're more built into the product and less changeable, but provide a more interactive user experience. And so Process Designer, Workflow Editor, and Task Editor in the Change Management Process Designer Content Pack, those are some early examples of the things that we could do, and I expect we'll do more in that area in future releases.
Great. We want to perform an integration with email using Connected, but don't have the email connector. We know SC Auto can be used to integrate with Outlook, but it's very, very basic. We were told to use HTML email connector package from HP, but when checking the feedback on the HP Live network, we found out that it doesn't support notifications to groups. What advice could we provide to this person, HP?
So are you looking for, so I have to ask a question back, are you looking for an inbound email integration or an outbound email integration?
Okay, and I'll outbound.
Maybe we can come back if they...
Actually, I got an answer back. Outbound is the answer.
Outbound. Yeah, I would definitely recommend, I would have recommended the HTML email package as well if they're on a version where that is supported. I'm not familiar with the group issue there, so I might have to look at that and see.
I had this topic in my practitioners forum a few weeks ago, and there actually is a enhancement request that what our Service Manager event outs do is it sends it to individual people only. So you can't put a PDL into your event out. And there is an enhancement request out there to allow for PDLs.
Okay.
As far as I remember.
Okay, can we, the next question is, can we implement SM-UCMDB integration using SSL?
Yeah, I can take this question. Actually, the current SM-UCMDB integration, the single sign-on, we are based on lightweight single sign-on, is dramatically simplified in the recent release. Particularly in the 9.30 release.
And Jerry, what version of UCMDB is supported for that? Is that 905 or is that earlier ones as well?
Yeah, even for the earlier version, I think it's 903 or 904, it's all supported.
Great. The next question is, does HP have a patch release schedule to help us better plan our deployments?
Sorry, can you say that question again?
Does HP have a patch release schedule to help us better plan our deployments? So I know that sometimes you can't give timelines when features are available, but do you have anything you can talk about publicly as far as release patterns, major, minor, what have you?
So we definitely have more flexibility in terms of talking about timelines on the defect correction thread. That's not one that anyone on the panel is very involved with, so I'd probably have to do a follow-up. And yeah, probably better that I don't guess at what the current timing is, and I don't see the person I would try to get a quick answer on that right now.
Okay. What I'd like to do is that we'll do that as a follow-up. I think people would certainly like to understand, do we plan for quarterly patches? Do we?
Yeah. So
I think that's very helpful.
Yes, I completely agree. Understanding that having a predictable nature on it and being able to work that into your plans, I understand how that would be very useful. So I guess the only thing I would say at this point is that we tend to do more frequent patches, plan patches on the newer versions, and on the older branches, they happen less frequently. So I believe on a new one, try to get them out quarterly, and maybe it's every 6 months on one that's a little older. But we should follow up and get you some better, more specific information on that.
Great. Any improvement on built-in reporting features?
Any improvement on built-in reporting?
So I know certainly last year you guys talked about Westbury, and Westbury are my co-chapter leaders of the SIG, and they have a whole operational reporting package. But of course it requires an investment. I think what people are asking is what sort of reporting might you get just with buying Service Manager? What comes out of box?
Right. So on the reporting front, I wouldn't say we have any improvements in the most recent version. that I remember off the top of my head. So we do have crystal-based operational reports that are available. Those are posted out on HP Live Network. You can also do charting and reporting internally in the tool through favorites and charts and through MySM. But the question was really around improvements and nothing that we can talk about like having come out in the past release other than our announcement of the relationship with Westbury for kind of advanced operational reporting.
Okay. Pete mentioned the process designer, a non-technical way of managing the technical aspects of Service Manager. Is that going to be a guiding principle going forward? As they make it simpler, there's a risk it loses functionality. Is that a valid concern?
So this is Pete. I think it's a valid concern, but it's also one that we've taken into account from the very start of the design. So one of our guides is we want to make sure that you can do everything functionally that you could before, even if you don't have the same ability to go into the code that you used to. In fact, there are a few rule types, such as the JavaScript, where you can actually go write the code and call the functionality directly if you are an advanced implementer. So I don't think we will lose any functionality from that perspective. Again, I'm always amazed by some of the things that our community does, and I mean that in a good way, for finding ways to do things. So I hope we don't miss any of those. But the nice thing about Process Designer is these rule types that do the work, they're very modular. So it's something that we can actually send out a new rule type as content. For example, when the HTML email solution came out, it was very quick. We created a new rule where you can send the HTML email. So we're hoping that modularity that we put in, if we do have any functionality that's missing or perhaps an integration comes out that needs a new bit of functionality, we'll be able to get that out very quickly. But again, we did leave some rule types in there, such as calling process records or calling JavaScript for those advanced implementers. So I don't think we'll lose the functionality. It just might be a slightly different way to get there. But again, one of the guiding principles also for us was we need to make it very simple to do the everyday things, such as mark a field as mandatory or set a field with a number record, or some examples of the wizard-driven rules that you don't have to know the code to do. So it's very hard to do a balance there, but I think so far we're doing a pretty good job. And if we do find anything missing, it's something that we can add.
Great. Is there any plan to improve the IR expert experience? IR regen, for example, has been a nightmare since SC version 4.x.
Can you repeat the question one more time? I heard the last part, but not the first part.
Sure. Is there any plan to improve the IR expert experience? IR regen, for example, has been a nightmare since SC version 4.x.
IR per se will not change. The biggest difference between SC6 and SM7 is that IR is now held in the database. So in a well-tuned database that is close to the Service Manager server, it's not too bad. What we always recommend is that you try to minimize your IR impact. For example, one of the recommendations is even dates will be IR indexed, but you hardly ever search for dates. So putting the numbers 1 through 31 into your stopwords file will be good, or the years 2010, 2011, 2012. So that shrinks your IR file, and the regens and the searches go faster, just as one idea on how to make it better. And of course, you can use knowledge management for searching, especially in Service Manager 930 with the Solar engine. It's very smooth and very fast too. So these are things that you can look into.
And I'll just add on to that, what Ira said, that we're not looking to improve IR Expert, but we are looking at better ways to use other technologies such as solar or even using functionality directly from the RDBMS. So again, I can't say anything about when, but it's definitely something that we'd like to do. We know IR Expert is problematic in some areas, but instead of investing on it, we'd like to leverage other technologies.
Okay. Are there any plans to change the knowledge search tool to be more like the Google appliance, as the current tool is not very useful for a large organization? And I'll add on to that question. HP just acquired Autonomy, which is searching technology. Just curious if there's anything you can share.
I think all that we could share, and Steve will tell me if not, is pretty much the same.
Pete, we lost you.
Okay, sorry, I think I bumped a button there. So again, you added Autonomy, and that's definitely in our mix as well. So we are looking at these technologies and the best way to integrate them without a large disruption to the current product. But yes, buying Autonomy, that was one of the first things that we wanted to look at. So again, can't put dates or releases or anything behind it, but instead of doing anything with our expert, we want to look at these technologies to improve it. In terms of the Google appliance, I think that's a little more autonomy than what we have with solar, but I'm not sure. I don't think I could answer any farther than that, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would just want to make sure that whoever asked the question has looked at the change in the search engine that was done with the 930 release, and then might be interested in some offline feedback on that.
Okay. The next question is, what is new in 9.30? And I'm going to assert that we do have a recording on the Vivid site where we did a whole session on what's new with 9.30. And if we get time at the end, I'll have HP touch on that question. Next question is, what will incident management be based on phases in the future instead of based on status?
So I guess I can. Oh.
Yeah, go for it, Pete.
Okay. So in the future, what we're working on currently is that incident management will be based on the process designer, just like the other modules that we're moving in, such as change. So whether it's designed on status or phase, once you're in process designer, you can actually decide. So in the designer, yes, you will design phases, so you can have it go from, say, open to assigned, work in progress, suspended, whatever you want to create. And you can either have that be a manual transition where someone hits a button and moves it to the next phase, like change management, or you can make it automatic so that if they change the status, it will automatically move to the phase. The phase is there to control what rules are fired and what form is displayed and what alerts are hooked in, but you can make that invisible to the user. You don't even have to display the workflow of the phases on the screen. So with the addition of Process Designer, it will really be an implementation decision whether you will do a phase-based approach like we currently do in Change, or you'll do a status-based approach where the record moves between phases pretty much hidden to the user, and they would just select the status to make that happen. Yeah, in fact, I think you'll see, I can't remember in the out-of-box change, well, there are definitely a few automatic transitions, but I believe most of it is manual.
Yeah, the automatic transitions in change are around the approval process. So once the change is approved or denied, it moves, either advances or I don't know, retreats in the process.
Right. But I'll also say it's pretty simple to clone an existing process and just replace those manual transitions with automatic if you want to use it as a base, but just change the functionality behind it.
Yep.
Okay. The next question is, it's kind of truncated here. Any often face issue in notification engine, mainly on alignment, any improvement under the pipeline. I wonder if this is a...
Yeah, I don't think I understood the question.
Yeah, I'm not sure I do either. Okay, let's move on here. Hi, I would like to ask about the order process work.
So if I could just could I make?
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw one comment out in there. So the notification engine is nice for the very complex setting up multiple groups and doing separate messages. But while we haven't put many changes into that, one thing that we are trying to do is add notification options in Process Designer as well to make it a little more process-based rather than do the large. It's not that you can't do both, but in terms of flexibility, I think adding it to the Process Designer will add a little flexibility in how these notifications can be sent. All right, sorry, done.
Okay, that's great. Hi, I would like to ask about the order process works. For example, when clicking the Save button to save a ticket, it may run a display option format control, a process, or a trigger. What's the order of processing? What will run first?
So a little tough on that question. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by order, but there is, if you're just talking about opening an incident or any record, there is an order of operations. And I'll be doing this off the top of my head, but I would probably check the documentation on this as well. So the display option is going to fire off first, of course, because it's related to the display option. And then once the processing goes, and this is where I would check the documentation, and I know it's in there because people asked. I believe that the rules from the Process Designer take precedence, and again they run in order, and then any format control, and then and that would be in the pre-update, and then there's if there's a record interaction, then the trigger would fire, and then of course you have the post rules and post format control. And I'm seeing in my little chat here that Iris has said that we actually have a published paper for the SM930 FAQ that has the order described exactly. So Iris, do you want to mention how we can get that?
Again, if you want to get white papers, you go to the self-solve knowledge search. You have to click on advanced search, and you have to check the white paper checkbox and the product service manager, and you will get a list. There's about 20 of them, I think. And you search for the SM930 FAQ, or frequently asked questions. And then there's a section on Process Designer, and in that section we have described exactly in what order format control, document engine, Process Designer, and everything around that is being called.
Wow, great. The next question is, Steve mentioned the queries against the database. Our DBA for SQL 2008 often laments the inefficiency of HP Service Manager compared to what it could do in SQL. I know that HPSM is meant to be usable in a variety of underlying database platforms. As you work on making improvements to HP Service Manager, are you looking to take advantage of functionality and features available in newer SQL and Oracle versions and dropping support for older database models?
So in terms of compatibility matrix, so we generally need to retain compatibility to older database versions, operating system versions, until the vendor puts those into obsolescence. So we have a wide range of customer profiles, some who move to newer technologies very quickly and some who move very slowly. So we have to keep a pretty broad compatibility matrix to satisfy those different type of customers. But we definitely have a desire to take better advantage of relational database capabilities. That was one of the drivers for the move back in Service Manager 7 to drop support for the proprietary database so that we would at least not have that extra complication in being able to leverage database capabilities. So it's a desire. I don't have any specifics on how we might do that in future releases.
Actually, what I might want to say is in Service Manager 930 and some of the older versions, we now have the ability to more and more do a select field by field instead of a select star. We have it now for virtual joins that we do a select by field name instead of select star, etc., etc. So in 930, there are quite a few improvements on the RDMS performance side that I can definitely recommend.
Good. Good to know. Change management module. Is the next question. If you hover your mouse over the fill button for a fill field, it says copy data from related record. However, on the incident module, the similar fill field says find possible data. How can I match that text on the change module?
It doesn't look like we have anybody that can answer that on this panel, so we'll have to follow up on that.
I think it is the default label, but I'm not sure if that's it.
Okay, well that's fine. We can follow up. Next question: is there any way to use SLA in request management, like using in incident or service desk management?
So we have not implemented the SLO response module in request management, so it's not available out of box. And I believe it would be very advanced tailoring to try to do that on your own. So I would generally say no.
Okay, so not something that you're working on.
It's definitely something that has come up a number of times in the past, so it's under consideration, but I wouldn't expect to see it real soon. So I did mention that in one of the threads that I'm working on is looking at service request fulfillment, which kind of encompasses service catalog and request management and other aspects. And I've definitely looked at what role SLM should play in that broad topic.
Okay. Next question. During tailoring, and it says consultants from HP partners, come across a lot of issues that look like defects. Is there any way to submit those findings to R&D for review besides using customer support contracts to open support calls, which often do not allow us to deal with root cause of these issues?
No, we really do encourage you to go through the support process. That's the standard way that we get feedback, both defects and enhancement requests, into the appropriate systems and through the appropriate channels, and it helps build up the knowledge base so that we can, if somebody else has reported it, it's able to be matched more quickly. So I would like to encourage people to do that, and if you're having some struggles there, you can email me offline and we can see how we might make it more efficient or improve it. But,
okay, yeah, I think probably people who do tailoring work are, I think their request really is for some kind of back channel, and I can understand the complexity of offering that. What leads to the decisions to remove certain functionality from one version to the next? Specifically, we used to be able to rotate the sm.log based on a schedule instead of the size. Calling the us.switch.log rad that called the log rotate RTE call. This stopped working when we upgraded to SM7, and the rad is gone in an out-of-box 9.3.
So I believe the decision on that one was to move some of that functionality from the application layer more toward the server layer to do that log rotation capability, to take some of the complexity of configuration out. It's been a little while on that one, so I might not have the exact situation. So we generally try to preserve the functionality that people are used to, but in some cases we do make changes to try to improve efficiency or simplify an area and make it easier for existing and new customers to use.
Okay.
Iris, did you have any additional insight on that one?
No.
Okay.
Okay. Next question is, do we have any document, does HP have any document explaining all the RAD applications available in HP Service Manager so we can use them in our customizations to avoid load on the system?
So
Iris,
I can touch on that in two ways.
Go for it, Pete.
So I was just going to touch on, no, we do not have documentation on all the RAD applications. And what I would say is there's probably some RAD applications that may be useful in tailoring, but we are going to do more and more work, especially on the process designer, to put a front end on those that makes it so you don't have to know what's behind it. So I don't think you would see us talking about RAD applications, especially as even in development we're moving away from RAD and using a lot of JavaScript and other tools. So I think what you would see is, again, more rule types around the process designer, and behind the scenes they may be accessing some pre-created RAD or JavaScript, but instead of documenting the JavaScript exactly, or the RAD, we would give a better front end. And what that is allowing us to do then is change that RAD, change that JavaScript, even move it from one to the other or to another technology. But because we're now defining it in metadata, it won't change the tailoring. So might not be the answer to the question exactly as you were looking for, but that's where we're going. One of our guiding principles is we don't want people to have to know the code per se, but just how to tailor and use the code behind the scenes.
Okay. Next question, is it possible to have a descriptive message if using the web when the license usage has exceeded? Currently the message we get is a browser error like problem displaying the page, not an SM error.
That's an interesting one. So that's if your license key has expired on a temporary one, or if
probably your license usage has exceeded. So maybe
you've exceeded your license usage.
Yeah, maybe you have concurrent licenses, and one more person is logging in than you have licenses for.
Yeah, that's
sounds to me as if the web client tries to open a session on Service Manager Server. Service Manager Server says, I won't open the session for you, so the browser doesn't get the information. That would be a hard one to change.
Yeah, so that's a new one for me, so I'd have to look in and see if there's already a ticket and some analysis done on that.
Okay. In Service Manager 7.11, can outbound email notifications be sent from different email addresses?
Not addresses, but you can change the from user, as far as I remember, with a parameter, but that is just for everyone. So you can't say this email was sent from Falcon and this one was sent from Bob Helpdesk. That does not work.
Yeah, I think we ran into that too, wanting to send from the change module versus a different module.
Yeah, it's always the same.
Yeah. Next question, will the process designer editor be further developed, for example, allowing parallel phase execution, array-based opening of tasks with array-based condition and closing phase definition?
All right, so I'll take that one and answer it in a couple of things. So The process designer itself is meant to be a single record workflow, so taking an incident or a change through a workflow. But we do know in modules such as change management that you do have multiple tasks open under that, and that's definitely something that we're addressing. Maybe not, it's hard, I can't say it's part of the process designer, but we're using a lot of the same technology. So some of this is already available. If you take a look at 930 with the content patch that does bring change up to using process designer, you will find a new functionality called change models. And what change models allow you to do is define your task flow for a change. And that includes, it's the same drag and drop interface. So you'll drag tasks onto a canvas. You're able to drag relationships between them too. So you can say these 3 tasks have to be finished before this next one starts. But you can also have these tasks running in parallel. You're also able to specify on those what the starting phase, what the starting change phase is, so when these should become available. So it's really allowing 2 things there. One, you're able to set up all these tasks ahead of time and know they're going, and then only open them when it's time for someone to work on them. And there is control to say this one can't be started until these 3 are finished. So that's the first part of it. What you'll see in a upcoming patch, and again I can't say any dates, but it's something that's been worked on, is to also, so that's kind of a pre-definition of a change. We're also extending that into a current change, so you can be actually, we call it the change plan, you can actually drag these tasks on your plan and the dependent tasks and everything, and you'll see them in your change even if the tasks haven't been open yet. And the same functionality of what phase this should open in, what phase it needs to be closed by, all that functionality. So that part is, it's actually in the code itself, but we have to surface the client piece again in a future web client release, web client patch in the near future. So that's the example I have of these parallel tasks. We'll use some of that same ideas behind other areas that have parallel tasks, such as request management in the future. And if there's any other parts that you'd like to talk about, we can have that as an offline discussion or another question here. But I really recommend taking a look at what we already have with 930 to see where we're going and make sure that's going to be helpful to you. We've had some really good feedback about it, so I definitely recommend taking a look.
Great, thank you. Next question is the executive scorecard, which HP has been recently talking about, going to replace Westbury as the preferred reporting tool for Service Manager?
So, no, executive scorecard is not a replacement for Westbury. We believe they are complementary solutions, and I could provide more information on how those can complement each other offline or separately.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is Westbury certainly is more operational reporting, and executive scorecard is really based more on KPIs. I looked at that recently as well. Next question is MySM. This dashboard would be very useful if the filter condition for the portlets would be more flexible. Will there be any enhancements on this?
So I believe that we did make the filters more flexible in some recent release. Does anybody on the panel have any more information around that? I'll have to follow up on that one offline, because I have an impression that the filters are more flexible than they used to be in the initial release. But maybe I might be mistaken there.
Okay. The next question is there any improvement in printing, interaction, incident, etc.?
Printing. I can't think of any recent improvements or recent major issues. I'd probably need to have more of a dialogue on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be interesting to know what version they're coming from, because I know in some older versions we were only using the text-based printing and didn't look very well. So in some of the later releases, there's been some improvements on the website printing.
Okay. Next question. Pete mentioned the HTML email. We have not implemented that yet due to a concern we saw on HP's portal about being unable to send to groups. And what I saw was the email to a group sends a single email to everyone in the group rather than grouping recipients. In addition, I'm confused on how email gets out of HPSM using the HTML forms. The upgrade doesn't include changes to SCS mtp.exe. Does that require SC Auto to send HTML emails?
So I'll touch on that, and hopefully I'll remember the whole thing, because there were a couple different questions there. So I did hear, and I put that that's a good request, that we do want to add the ability to send to a PDL instead of every operator. I'll say that one reason that we're sending to every operator is because right now they can be in different languages. So the only downside I see of going to the PDL is you would only be able to send it in one language, but again, I would want to surface that as your choice. So either send to a PDL or send to each operator, so that if there are different languages involved, you can do that. So again, not right there, but we'll definitely bring that as an ER. I'm sure it's already in there, but we'll try to move it up a bit. And the second one, I don't think I could answer. I didn't quite understand. But with the HTML email, there's been work on, I don't believe it goes through the same SC Auto, and maybe I'm wrong, so Steve, please correct me. But there was some work done on the server so that it could send the email in an HTML format, but I couldn't tell you which component that was, unfortunately.
It is the SM-email out, and it is not SC Auto because the HTML email is outbound email only. So it's the SM-email out, which in old versions was known as SC email. It's a special executable in the olden days, and now it is a parameter to the SM executable that handles the sending of outbound HTML email.
Okay. Next question is not a question for the developers, but for the Vivid organization. Would you have a recorded version of this webinar? The answer is yes. It'll be posted sometime after this webinar today. Next question is there any easy way to change data types of fields in dbdict, or plans to try and make it easier? Specifically, we moved from P4 to Oracle, creating a number of blob fields, and are now experiencing problems reporting against these fields and want to change them to a data type readable by Crystal directly against the database.
It can be done in the dbdict utility. You have to be careful that you do it correctly. If you have something as a binary LOB, then the SQL RC field is set to true. If you change that to something else, then you have to change the SQL RC field as well. Then there are different ways of remapping. You can do the move from SQL to SQL with a different way of mapping arrays. So you can say, instead of field and main table, you can say multi-row array table, for example. The problem with the move from SQL to SQL is you can do only a table at a time. Then the other thing is you can go directly into the dbdict, and if you know exactly what you're doing and you are careful, you can change the field mappings within the dbdict. But again, you have to be extremely sure of what you're doing. You can contact customer support to find out how to perform these things. That might be the easiest way. Not every field can be mapped to something else. So if it's a binary field, you can't change that to a character field just by doing it here, because typically when it maps something to a BLOB or a blob, that is because there are characters in the array field that it cannot interpret correctly. So you might have to go through and clean up your character array first prior to doing that. Or if it's a array of structure, it defaults to a BLOB, and you can change that one to a multi-row array table, either with a move from SQL to SQL or by changing the field mapping directly. But in that case, move from SQL to SQL is most likely the easier way. And the other thing I have to say on that one is if you do these changes, it will do a full table copy. It can take hours to days, depending on how big your data is. And I think I got myself into enough trouble now.
Okay. I know that we have done this ourselves, and it is tricky, and you really need to know what you're doing.
Yes.
9.3 supports a new HTML engine. Can we use it also with 9.2 and only binary upgrade RTE to 9.3? And I guess I have an ancillary question. We're running 7.11, and I've heard recommendations to upgrade the binaries to run to 9.3. Can you talk about that as a practice, and is that something HP suggests is okay to do?
So I'll take the second one, but let's see if anybody can answer the first question related to the HTML email first.
The HTML email.
Well, I heard HTML engine.
Yeah, 9.3 supports a new HTML email engine. Can we
Email.
Use it,
okay, sorry.
Can we use it also with 9.2 and only binary upgrade RTE to 9.3?
As far as I remember, it required both binaries and applications, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
I am sure there were application changes, so
okay, so it requires both.
I would have to reference the content pack on Live Network to just double confirm what versions are supported. But if it lists 930, then it requires you to be on 930 application and RTE. That's the only configuration that it would have been tested and certified with. On the question of upgrading binaries only and running older applications, yes, that is something that we are encouraging customers to do. It's relatively straightforward to move to newer binary versions compared to an application upgrade, and you can get a lot of benefits by getting on the newer versions of the server and clients. So we definitely recommend that customers plan for that, even if they're not looking to go through an application upgrade in the near future.
Okay, and in our particular case, people will say, well, why would you do that? We looked at 930, and specifically we used BOMGAR chat and could not modify SRC to incorporate BOMGAR, so we're waiting until we get a release of SRC where we can modify and include BOMGAR, and then we'll make that leap.
Right. So there's lots of considerations in terms of going through an application upgrade and what the timing is and what version you want to land on, and not wanting to go through them too often. So I definitely understand why you would be very measured in when you go through that project, but you should be able to do the RT upgrade independently.
Okay. 9.3 slides talk about an integrated survey engine, likely by a third party, HP support, or at the web page cannot provide any information on that. Where can I look that up?
So we have a partnership with a company called Market Tools for survey integration. And we have released the integration between Service Manager and Market Tools, and that is posted on Live Network. So I would direct you to Live Network for more information. And if you don't find anything useful there, you can contact me. This is Steve.
Okay. In SM 9.30, does end-user updates on an SD record reach the engineer on an IM record?
Not out of the box, but you can tailor this.
Okay. Next question, what could be possible ways of monitoring SM processes running in the background, provided Anubis is configured, still processes are dying out? I'm not sure I quite understand that question.
So there's a background process called Anubis.
Okay.
I think that's named after the Greek god of the underworld, something like that.
Okay.
And
Egyptian, but yeah.
oh, close enough, somewhere down there. What the Anubis process does is it monitors background processes that were started with in the startup record in the info table. And if one of them disappears, it restarts it. And that still works in the newer versions as well. So can you explain the latter part of the question? It sounded like the processes still disappear, although Anubis is running?
It is Greek.
Just says still processes are dying out. What could be a possible way of monitoring SM processes running in background, provided Anubis is configured, still processes are dying out?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're having processes die and Anubis is not catching them and restarting, I think we need to do some more root cause analysis to understand what was going on and to be able to provide some advice there.
Okay. And someone commented that Hades is actually rules the underworld in Greek mythology. So.
Right. So Anubis is Egyptian.
Okay.
Although it is a Greek name.
Next question, is there any possibility of having out-of-box functionality to open the incident or service request automatically from an interaction?
Can you read that again?
Is there any possibility of having out-of-box functionality to open the incident or service request automatically from the interaction?
I'd have to understand the use case for doing that to be able to answer.
Yeah, in recent SRC releases, we have the feature called support catalog. For those support catalog items, we can directly create the incident record. So I'm not sure if this is about. Yeah,
one of the things I could think about is certainly, and we have done this probably internal tailoring where given a certain type of request, of course customer information is recorded in an interaction, and then we want to auto-escalate to a particular team. And so, that may be what they're thinking about as far as the use case. Okay. So we're about 10 minutes after the hour here. I think I'll do a couple of more questions, then we'll need to wrap up. Anything that we will provide this list of questions to HP, and anything that they were needed to look up or we were not able to answer today, we'll follow up on. The next question is why does the Processes and Best Practices Guide not include all Service Manager modules, more specifically knowledge and request? And will there ever be a document explaining the administration checkboxes and fields under system administration to fully understand their functionalities and impact to the system when enabling or disabling?
So we took a phased approach to documenting the best practices. So initially we covered 5 modules with the intent to continue to cover more. We haven't made great progress on that. I think that's an area where we need to continue to focus, and that does tie back to what I mentioned on my projects earlier around looking at process definitions for additional areas. So I didn't specifically mention knowledge, although I could see us doing that, but we do want to provide more best practice process documentation for other modules, as we probably those will most likely be tied to going through and doing process designer enablement and new process definitions in areas. And then in terms of the system information, I would definitely expect that we would be documenting that. So if we're not all, I'd have to look into why we don't have documentation in that area.
Okay. And then the last question that we'll take here today, I think you've answered it as asked in a different way, but I'm going to ask it in this way. Are there any plans for a general change of the data model of Service Manager, transforming it into a true normalized database?
No, I wouldn't expect that we would be able to make that dramatic of a change in Service Manager in a short time frame. Any big change like that again would have really big upgrade implications that we need to ensure that we covered appropriately, and would need to be part of a major release with that level of change.
Okay. Well, Iris, Jerry, Pete, and Steve, I thank you very much for joining us today. And with that, I'll wrap this up. We will provide this list of questions to HP. Anything they were not able to answer during this session, we'll be asking them to follow up, and we'll post those answers in the coming week or so. Thank you all, and look forward to more sessions from HP Service Manager's sake. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you for your questions.
Have a great
Thank
day.
you.
Yeah.